In the name of God, and welcome back to the endocrine physiology. As you know, we are reviewing the main endocrine gland in the body, and in this time and in this file, I'm going to discuss about another endocrine system that is governing our body and helping the physiological process in the body to happen. In this session, I'm going to discuss about the hormonal system that are regulating the calcium and phosphate concentration in the blood. And these hormones, that is not just one hormone, at least two hormones are the main hormones and plus one another hormone. Calcitonin, parathormone, and also vitamin D3. In this session, I'm going to discuss about them. Firstly, when we are talking about the regulation of calcium and phosphate, we should know that the distribution of calcium in the blood. We should know about the physiological importance of calcium and phosphate. Why the body employed one hormonal system to regulate the calcium and phosphate concentration. Regulation of calcium and phosphate regulation, the key organs and hormones involved in this regulation, such as parathyroid gland, intestine, bone, kidney, skin, and the hormones such as vitamin D, PTH, and calcitonin will be reviewed in this part. First of all, let me start to discuss about the calcium and and phosphate balance that we have between in everyday life. As you can see in this figure, every day we are absorbing some calcium and phosphate from the GI system, and this calcium and phosphate originated from our food, the content of our food, and then some of these calcium and phosphate will be absorbed according to the regulatory mechanism that I will review them. Some of these calcium and phosphate are not successful to absorb, are not successfully absorbed, and therefore they will be lost in the stool. On the other hand, those calcium that is absorbed and phosphate that is absorbed in the blood will have a balance between the bone and the kidney. We have a calcium phosphate concentration of about 10 milligram per deciliter and phosphate concentration of 4 milligram per deciliter. In the secretion that we have in the gastrointestinal system, some calcium and phosphate will be secreted into the GI system. Some of these calcium and phosphate will be absorbed by the bone and then will be crystallized in the bone structure and therefore remain in the bone. At the same time, some of these calcium and phosphate will be excreted into the urine and will be lost in the urine. Some calcium that is being filtrated into the urine should be absorbed by the kidney. In the bone, not only we have a process of calcium absorption, but also in the cases that body need calcium, some calcium is able to be to release into the blood. GI system absorb calcium and phosphate, and some calcium and phosphate is being secreted. As you can see, these whole mechanisms are working to maintain the balance. And mainly, we should say that the balance that we have is the amount of calcium that is being lost in the urine and in the stool should be equal to the amount of the calcium that we absorb into the blood. But we know that bone as a structure, as a main structure, has a very high amount of calcium and phosphate as a reserve. Sometimes this reserve is being used to compensate the lost or the local calcium concentration. And in the situation that we have high calcium concentration, this extra calcium, some of this extra calcium will be absorbed by the bone. Bone play a role as a reserve mechanism. Okay. This figure shows the balance that I told you in a more detailed picture. As you can see, in our calcium intake is about 1,000 milligram or 1 gram per day. In a normal diet, 1 gram of calcium is being ingested by our diet. From this 1,000 milligram or 1 gram, about 350 milligram is being absorbed by the gastrointestinal system, and at the same time, about 250 milligram is being secreted into the intestine. The net result is that every day about 100 milligram of calcium is being absorbed, and the remaining, that is very large amount, about 900 milligram, will be lost in the feces or stool. The net absorption that we have in the intestine is about 100 milligram. This 100 milligram will be added to the blood, and in the extracellular space, it will be distributed in different extracellular fluid. Normally, in our blood and our extracellular fluid, I'm not just talking about the blood, all extracellular fluid. We have about 1,300 milligram of calcium, and this is stable. As you can see, every cell in the body have about 13,000 milligram or 13 gram of calcium. That these calcium are stored inside the cells, inside the mitochondria, inside the reticulum endoplasmic, and the other organelles. And these are the intracellular calcium reserve that we have. And you know that this calcium is involved in several physiological mechanisms that I will discuss about them. And this amount, this 1,300 milligram, is continuously exchanging with the extracellular space. Some are absorbed by some cells absorb calcium, some cells secrete some calcium, but the balance remains almost at a balanced situation. In the kidney, every day, about, as you can see, about 1,000 milligram or a little less than 1,000 milligram of calcium is being filtered into the urine. But kidney do not allow this whole calcium to be lost. As you can see, the majority of this calcium is being reabsorbed. Just 100 milligram per day is being excreted in the urine, and the other 988 and the other 9,880 milligram per day will be reabsorbed. As you can see, about 10 times of calcium that we have in the blood and in the extracellular space is being excreted into the urine, but not at once, gradually during the 24 hours. And at the same time, the majority of this is being reabsorbed, and just 100 milligram of calcium is being lost in the urine. You may say the whole calcium that we have in the extracellular space is just 1,300 milligram, and how it is possible to lose such large amount of calcium. This is because the reabsorption that is continuously happening, and therefore sometimes one ion may recycle several times. But as you can see, every day 100 of milligram of calcium is being lost in the urine, and about 900 milligram per day is being lost in the stool. And totally, we can say that about 1,000 milligram of calcium is being lost every day. And this is the same amount of calcium that we ingested every day, 1,000 milligram that we ingested. This is the balance. What is the role of kidney? What is the role of bone? As you can see, bone, the whole bone in the body, has about 1 million milligram or 1 kilogram of calcium that is stored inside the bones. And every day, different bones are able to absorb about 500 milligram per day, and at the same time secrete about the same amount of 500 milligram per day into the blood. Therefore, we have another balance. And this balance is remaining. Every day, we ingested about 1,000 milligram, and at the same time, 1,000 milligram is being lost in the urine and in the stool. And then the calcium is exchanging between the bone and between the cell and between the extracellular space, and the concentration of calcium remain constant in the blood. And this remaining constant in the blood is the function of the hormones that I'm going to discuss about them, and the organs that I will discuss about them. Okay, now that we discuss about the distribution and balance of calcium in different area of the body, and the balance that we have between the calcium that is being lost and reabsorbed, let me to discuss about the distribution of calcium in the body. From the whole calcium that we have in the body, that is around 1,000 gram or 1 kilogram of calcium in one adult person. Almost all this calcium, or 99% of this calcium, is stored inside the bones. And just 1% of calcium is found in other tissue and extracellular space. From the 99% of calcium that we have in the bones, again 99% is found inside the bone as crystallized forms, and they are not free calciums. And just 1% of this calcium is found in the fluid inside the bones, or bone fluids. I mean that just 1% of calcium in the bones are accessible by the bone to be distributed between the extracellular space and blood, and the other 99% is not ready to be exchanged with the blood. I will tell you that this crystallized form also is not completely constant. Sometimes some cells are able to solubilize and release the calcium from this crystallized form, and on the other hand, some calcium that we have in the bone as free calcium are able to precipitate as crystallized form in the bone. The 1% of calcium that we have outside the bones, this calcium is distributed between the cells and extracellular space. And I told you that about 1,300 milligram of calcium is found inside the cells and organelles of the cells, and you know that this is the extremely important part. And the remaining is in the extracellular space. And you know that when we are talking about extracellular space, I mean the calcium that we have in the bloodstream and the calcium that we have outside the blood vessels, between the cells, not inside the cells, not inside the blood, in the extracellular space, in the interstitial fluid. This is the distribution of calcium in a normal adult person. But I should tell you that sometimes, according to the physiological states of the body, sometimes this person may change. For example, in a situation that we need the calcium concentration in the blood is decreasing, sometimes some calcium is being absorbed from the bone. And on the other hand, when we have high calcium availability, some of these high calcium will be precipitated inside the bones. This figure shows the distribution of calcium between the tissues. As you can see, in the skeleton, we have about 99% of the all calcium, and just 1% is in the soft tissues and inside the cell and extracellular space. And as you can see, in the extracellular fluid and plasma, that is the calcium that we have in the extracellular fluid, outside the cells and outside the bones, this amount, you can see that about 50% of calcium is ionized calcium that is free and is able to exchange, and the other 50%, about 45%, is linked and bonded to the proteins, and 5% is complex with some other anions such as bicarbonate, phosphate, lactate, citrate, and this whole 55% that you can see here is not free. This whole 55% of calcium is free to exchange and between the bloodstream and extracellular space. I mean, in the whole calcium that we have in the blood, just 55% are free to exchange, and other 45% that are bonded to the proteins are not free and exchangeable. And this is a very important point that you should know about it. This shows the normal calcium level that I told you. It's around 9.4 milligram per deciliter, or 2.4 millimole per liter. I told you that about 55% of this calcium is ionized, 10% combined with the anions such as citrate, phosphate, and other anions, and about 40% is combined with plasma protein. This has a difference with the previous figure. The previous reference told you that about 45% is non-diffusible, but this reference says that 40% is non-diffusible. Anyway, you should know that the protein that are bonded to the calciums that are bonded to the proteins are non-diffusible, and the other part are diffusible calcium. According to this slide, I can say that about 60% is diffusible and 40% non-diffusible. This I ask you, if I ask you about the calcium concentration that is diffusible or non-diffusible, your reference is better to be this slide, not the previous figure that I told you. Okay. I told you that normal calcium concentration is about 9.4. But you see, if this level of calcium decreased to just about 30%, decrease in the calcium and reaching the calcium concentration to 6, immediately cause some problems. For example, we have some signs of extra excitability in the muscle cells, because when calcium concentration is low, then the cells are more readily and more easily stimulated and spontaneous action potential will be produced. And for this reason, even for example, a very soft touch to the, or very soft knock to the muscle cells stimulate the muscle and do the contraction that you can see in this figure. And sometimes you can see the trousseau signs that you can see stimulate the muscle of the hand and cause a rigidity in the muscle. These are spontaneous contractions that happen because of low calcium concentration, and because we know that calcium is a regulator factor for the excitability of the cell. If calcium concentration decreases to a little lower value, about 4, the person will die. Can you realize how the calcium is important? Just a 50%, about 50 or a little more than 50% decrease in calcium concentration in the blood will cause death. On the other hand, if calcium concentration increases from 9.4 to 12, you can see immediately the depression of the central nervous system and depression of muscle activity. This is the reverse of the previous sign will happen. And in a little higher concentration, the toxicity to the heart started. We have decreased QT interval and constipation, lack of appetite, and in higher concentration, even cardiac arrest can happen. And in a concentration of about 16 to 17, calcium start to precipitate inside the blood and cause death. You can see, therefore, calcium is very dangerous when it is very high or very low, and therefore it should remain in a very limited value, in a very limited range, and the maintenance of the calcium in this range is extremely important for us. And for this reason, I told you that body provides some hormonal mechanism for regulation of this calcium concentration. And I will discuss about this hormonal mechanism. Before starting discussing about the hormonal mechanism and organs that are involved in calcium regulation, let me to review the physiological importance of the calcium. I told you that in two side, decrease or increase, it is dangerous. But what is the importance of calcium? You know that firstly I told you that the skeleton, the bones, are formed from calcium, and the stability of bones is dependent on calcium. Therefore, structural integrity of a skeleton is completely dependent on calcium. Calcium is also very important in normal biochemical, physiological process in the body. For example, neuromuscular excitability, as you saw, when the calcium was lower or when it was high, the neuromuscular activity was disrupted. On the other hand, the process of blood coagulation depends on calcium. Calcium is the factor number 4. Without calcium, coagulation will not happen. And you know that this is a process that is protective for the body. On the other hand, hormonal secretion is dependent on calcium. Calcium enters the cell and then vesicles will release their content. Enzymatic regulation also is another function of calcium. Several enzymes are working, several very important enzymes are working inside the body, that they are completely dependent on calcium, and calcium is involved in their regulation. Membrane integrity is also dependent on calcium, and plasma membrane transport also depend on calcium. You cannot imagine life without calcium, because life is impossible without these functions. And this is one reason that I told you calcium is extremely important for us. What about phosphate? Again, you can see that phosphate has a balance between the food intake and the amount of the phosphate that is being lost in the body, in the feces and in the urine. Every day we have about 20 milligram per kilogram per day of phosphate that we ingested in our food. About 7 milligram per kilogram is being lost in the stool and about 13 milligram in the urine. As you can see, again, the same amount of the intake is being lost. Therefore, input and output are the same. Meanwhile, we have a balance between the bone, blood, and the intestine. We have a total absorption of intestinal phosphate that is about 16 milligram per kilogram per day, and about 3 milligram per kilogram per day is being secreted into the intestine. Therefore, I can say that totally 13 milligram of calcium per kilogram per day is being absorbed from the intestine. This phosphate will be added to the phosphorus pool in the blood and in the extracellular space. And this amount of phosphate that we have in the extracellular space and blood is in continuous exchange with the bone and inside the cells. This figure do not show the cells, but you should note again the cells are also important. And you know that bone every day absorb about 3 milligram per kilogram per day and also secrete the same amount. Therefore, we have a continuous but balanced amount of uptake and release of phosphate in the bone. By this figure, you can see that again the balance is remaining. This balance is maintained by several organs such as bone, kidney, intestine, and these are very similar to the calcium. From the whole phosphate that we have in the body, again, distribution says that about 80% of the phosphate is stored inside the bone and skeleton and teeth, and 10% in the blood and muscle, and 10 other remaining remain as different chemical complexes inside the cells. What is the importance of phosphate? Again, phosphate is very important, play a very important role in the cellular metabolism. It's a source of energy in the cellular reactions. It's a component of phospholipid in the membrane. And again, phosphate is a backbone of nucleic acids. You know that when we have energy source, energy is generated in the mitochondria, ATP is formed. And you know ATP is a energy mediators. And when the ATP is one phosphate is being removed from the ATP, ADP is formed, energy will be released. Therefore, phosphate is a mediator for calcium, for energy reactions. And all these mechanisms show how much the phosphate is important for us. Okay, now that we talk about the phosphate and calcium and their importance and their importance and also their distribution, I finished this part here, and in the next part, because I try to maintain the length of this file not more than 30 minutes. Therefore, and make it manageable for you, downloadable and easily to manage. Therefore, here I stop this file and continue to discuss about the key hormones and key organs that are involved in the regulation of calcium and phosphate. Therefore, this part remains for the next file. Please listen to this file in right order. Okay. For now, thank you very much. and please follow me in the next file. Thank you.